Running Aces Casino and Racetrack is the Twin Cities' premier choice for exciting entertainment, 24/7 gaming and dining, monthly comedy shows, and $1 blackjack with no commission or ante, making it the most player-friendly casino around. Trout Air Tavern at Running Aces offers Minnesota-inspired handcrafted dishes with locally sourced ingredients and the trout that made the area famous. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack, 25 minutes north of downtown. Visit runaces.com. Running Aces, your night out is waiting.
Hello and welcome to the post-Minnesota Vikings San Francisco 49ers Purple Podcast. Matthew Coller and Judd Zulgad along here with you. And Judd, I'm going to cut you off at the pass. And I'm going to say first that we all know that this was a not pretty football game, as many in week one are. So let's just get that out of the way first.
I can't complain about how ragged the play was. I can't complain about the fact that it's going to take 3 weeks because that's just the way this league works now. Okay, I won't complain about it.
You can, but let's complain about it a little later. Let's start with the most important aspects of this National Football League contest. A 24-16 win for the Vikings. I want to start with this being the way that the Vikings are going to win if they go far in the NFL this year, where we are going to see flashes and times where the offense is impressive and great throws at times and big runs or screens at times. But for the most part, Judd, this is the Minnesota Vikings defense that is going to win them games if they are going to win the division, make the playoffs, reach the NFC Championship, and so forth. And that was what we saw today.
As you know, I much like Zim, like to break the season up into quarters. So I'll speak about the season.
I did know that about
I'll
you.
speak about this year in a matter of quarters. We've talked about this previously. I think what you just said is dead on accurate for at least the first quarter of the season. That being said, if you can get the offensive line on track, and I'm not guaranteeing that you can, but if you can, I think this offense has the ability to become much more functional at some point in time, but it's not going to be now. We talked about this probably 2 weeks back. Today's game played out pretty much of the early season Viking blueprint, which is your defense is going to have to win you games. Your defense is going to have to play very well, which, by the way, it can. And your offense is going to have to not make mistakes. But if you say to your offense that we're going to have to rely on you, you're in trouble. Now, it does help. Thank you very much. I think, in fact, you know what? I think the Vikings should send a care package home with San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan, because they owe them a great debt of gratitude for coming into this stadium and deciding that it was going to be a good idea to run the football a lot of times, which I don't get. But yes, at least for the first 4 games, if not a little bit longer, I'm with you. I think what we saw today is going to be the blueprint for how this team is going to find success. And then you would hope gradually, especially if the offensive line improves, that you begin to see a more dynamic offense. But to have expected that today was asking a lot.
Well, let's start with the defense to break it down here, and then we'll work our way around to the offensive line, Kirk Cousins, and Dalvin Cook's return, and so forth. Jimmy Garoppolo finishes this game, Judd, 15 for 33, 261 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, and he was sacked 3 times. And this is a defense that last year we saw play all of its starters for all the snaps the entire time. We did not see that today. Trey Waynes got hurt fairly early in the game after actually making a great play to break up a touchdown pass. And then we saw Jaron Kearse mix in at the nickel corner position, which we have not seen him play at all. We saw at one point all 4 defensive linemen come out of the game, which Sheldon Richardson said was pretty rare to see.
Which the head coach was not pleased about.
What did he say about it?
Zim said that he was asked about the approach of trying to sub in guys, because he did express after last year that guys got tired, and he said, yes, I like the system, but we are not supposed to do all 4 at once. I will talk to Andre Patterson about that.
Really?
So
wow, okay.
taking all 4 out like a hockey line change was evidently, when it came to the head coach, not part of the game plan, and somebody decided they were going to do it. And I think Mike might have had a couple of F-laden words to describe his displeasure with all 4 guys coming out at once.
Well, that was one of the times that the 49ers worked the ball down the field in that situation, but ultimately ended with an Alfred Morris fumble, which goes back to your point about San Francisco, and we'll get into some of the issues that they had. But sticking with the defense, they showed today with working into Sean Bauer Bauer, working in Stephen Weatherly, working in Jaleel Johnson, that they do have much better defensive line depth than we even expected. And Sheldon Richardson said after the game, these guys were really playing well in the preseason, and that's what the preseason is for these guys to show that they deserve to be on the field. And they did that. And this, to me, Judd, this was already the best defense in the league. But I had a lot of questions about how they would match up against really, really good quarterbacks. I'm not putting Garoppolo in the Aaron Rodgers category. No. But I was concerned about whether they'd be able to stay at the top with the combination of the schedule and the depth. One of those things I think was resolved today, that they do have the depth to maintain their excellence on defense, even when they lose a starting corner.
Mm-hmm. And Hughes played well. I mean, it was in the post game, Zimmer addressed the fact that he made some mistakes, and he probably definitely did. But Garoppolo throws a bad pass, and to Hughes' credit, he picks it off and walks in for a touchdown. And this goes back to what we've talked about quite a bit. But this defense, flat out, is so well coached, and Harrison Smith remains incredible. Sid asked a post game question of Zimmer, basically said that Harrison Smith had taken heat from the local press, and even Mike Zimmer said, "No, Sid, I don't think so. He had one bad game, Philadelphia." But Harrison Smith is an incredible player. I found it very intriguing, though, to go back to a point that you brought up about the defense. I found it very intriguing that we saw a nickel package that had 3 safeties on the field, and since they signed Iloka, we assumed that 3 safety package would be Harrison Smith, Sendejo, and Iloka, and not Curse. So that was an interesting curveball, and I don't know if that means that Iloka is just not up to speed yet, or if they like Curse, because we talked, a month ago or 3 weeks ago about Curse's role and about the fact that he was clearly a good special teams guy, but there was even a conversation on this podcast, I believe, about if he was definitely going to make the 53-man roster. So it was really interesting when Waynes went out to see that he was not just used, but Curse was used in a very important role and used quite a bit, I thought.
Now, I will say about Jaron Curse that going back to 2016, Mike Zimmer has been very high on Jaron Curse, and he has told us time and time again, I like Jaron Curse. I like Jaron Curse. And, with some coaches, you could sort of blow that off. But when Mike Zimmer says he likes a defensive back, then there's a reason that Mike Zimmer likes a defensive back, because he sees something that's there. And talking with Curse after the game, he said that it was part of the plan for him to work in at nickel. And, man, he's the tallest nickel I've ever seen. A guy at 6'4", 6'5", playing in the nickel is a little unique, but he was able to perform well, and that would have been one of the things where I said, if you told me Jaron Curse is playing the nickel week 1, I'd be saying, oh, man, they're giving up more than 16 points. But the fact that they were able to adjust on the fly was very impressive. The defensive line did exactly what the defensive line does. It sacked Garoppolo 3 times. That interception was a blitz that Curse and Eric Hendricks came from the same side, but Danielle Hunter right there. If you had high expectations for Danielle Hunter, I think you're in the right camp, because he looked like a complete monster. He's going to have a huge year. Yeah, he looked like a monster
enormous
today.
Year. Yeah, I've been saying this. Since he's had this, I think it was preseason game 2 against Jacksonville here, he had the sack where he took the quarterback and he schooled the lineman trying to block him, walked right around him, took the quarterback and slammed him down with one arm. This guy is going to have a monster season. If he stays on the field, I think he's going to be fantastic. And this also, hey, look, this goes back to coaching too. They took this guy that they basically took a flyer on, and this coaching staff, and to Danielle's credit as well, but this coaching staff has developed him into a guy who I think is going to be a Pro Bowl player for a long time. I mean, this guy is a specimen, and he's fun to watch.
I would also say that I am the biggest Tom Johnson defender that you will ever find. That I watched a lot of,
because he gave you X's and O's.
He gave me X's and O's in the locker room, but also his intelligence. You could see it on the field, the way he prepared, the way he would eat guys up, getting after the passer. He was an important part of their defense the last few years. He's not as good as Sheldon Richardson, and I think we saw that today. Sheldon Richardson is a monster in the middle. There's a reason why Mike Zimmer wanted him so badly to come in and fill that 3-technique spot, and there's a reason that this man, after this year, my guess, is going to go somewhere else and get paid a ton of money, because he's very, very good. And I thought he was part of that, just complete domination up front by the Vikings defense today.
I believe on the last pick that Smith got that basically put an end to this game, if you go back and look, Sheldon is right there on Garoppolo. And Garoppolo flashed today at times. I mean, there's something there because there were throws that he made under duress that were exceptional. But this defense is very, very tough too. And there were times he panicked. So, yeah, I think the Sheldon signing, I really contend this. I think the Sheldon Richardson signing comes down to this. Rick went and signed his quarterback, right? 3 years, $84 million guaranteed for Cousins. And I think Mike came in and said, that's awesome. That's fantastic. I want a defensive guy like that. And they said, okay, we'll go out and get you a one-year guy.
And Richardson, his combination with Linval Joseph, stuffing runs on first down. But that leads me to the next point, Judd, that, the defense's performance was fantastic. The San Francisco 49ers shot themselves in the foot from the head coach to the quarterback to wide receivers / tight ends dropping 50-yard passes to, on the other side, dropped interceptions. I think that this building has an effect on other teams. That being on the road, being in here, being against a team so good, it's not just the fans of the crowd or the lighting, but the intimidation factor of playing this team where we see teams make more dumb mistakes here playing against the Vikings than you usually do. Because today there was a myriad of them all over the field for the 49ers.
Okay, I'll give you players there. All right? I'll give you players. Garoppolo's young, impressionable. He's going to be good. In fact, I think that one day he's going to be very good. But I will give you players make mistakes because this is a tough place to play. But explain play calling to me. Why do you come in here and give the ball to Alfred Morris and on the goal line basically and say, you know what I want you to do? A gap. It's Linval Joseph and Sheldon Richardson. You're not going to score. The play calling to me, for Kyle Shanahan to get flummoxed or whatever happened, I understand the need and the want of an offensive mind to establish a run game, but is that how you're going to do it against this team? I mean, give yourself a chance.
And there were times in the fourth quarter that they're down by 2 scores and they're still running on first down, and that doesn't even begin to address the one you mentioned, Alfred Morris at the goal line. Linval Joseph and Sheldon Richardson are in the middle. These are two of the best players at their position in the NFL, and yet opposing teams insist on trying to slam it up the middle. The Saints cost themselves a playoff win in this building by doing the same exact thing.
But explain it to me.
And you mentioned coaches. I mean, we saw Sean Payton outsmart himself last year and make mistakes coaching in the divisional game against this team. So even the greatest coaches, even ones who have won Super Bowls, they still make these mistakes. And I thought Kyle Shanahan's play calling was baffling at times. To continue to give the ball to a 30-year-old running back who's been washed up for a while, time and time again in big situations was pretty stunning. And then you go to the other mistakes that the players made. Jimmy Garoppolo misses George Kittle wide open in the end zone, just overthrows him. That's not something I would expect Garoppolo to do many times. There's a dropped pick. It might have been a pick 6 that Kirk Cousins threw, and the 49ers gave that away. So when we talk about the way that the Minnesota Vikings are going to win, if it's their division, the defense has to do what it did today. Pressure the quarterback. It's going to have the depth that they had. But also, the breaks along the way are going to have to happen. And I know that goes for anything, but you really saw it today that the 49ers could have won this game, and they just made so many mistakes that they took themselves completely out of it with the 3 picks, the fumble, the drop passes, and things like that.
And I get the mistakes by players. I'll just go back to I don't get the game plan of we've got Alfred Morris. I wonder what we should do. Let's just play old school football. Let's just go up the middle. That's not going to work. So I understand when Garoppolo makes a bad throw, and I understand when a potential pick on what would have been a very nice play gets dropped. I get all of that. But when it comes down to the fundamentals of play calling, and Shanahan's so smart, Coller, that I thought that there were instances where, okay, he did this, and it seems weird, but it's trying to set up a different play or something. And I don't think it did. I think it was just him being stubborn and saying, we're going to run the damn ball. And I understand the fact that you can't abandon the run completely. But if it's Alfred Morris and you're at the 1, I think I'm going to get a little bit more creative and try something that probably is a pass, because you've got at least a chance of scoring against this defense on that play. I could have told you 9 times out of 10, if you run him up the middle against these two guys, you're not going to score.
Now, maybe when I go back and look at the tape, I will see some of the bigger plays that they were able to create down the field set up by runs. That you do sometimes see that where they show a formation and a setup on a certain down and distance, and then they go back to that because everything is so intricate, and maybe there is that. Maybe I'll find it. But it was the combination of running at the goal line, which baffled me, and the I formation, slamming it up the middle, the least efficient play you can have in the NFL. I mean, that was one thing. You almost never saw that from Pat Shurmur. Even when he was running Latavius Murray in, it was very rare that they were stuffing all the big guys together and doing it.
The one thing I'm curious about, if you're going to see, is this. And Shanahan started the game this way, and I think he tried to do it a bit throughout the course of the game, and I actually like it, and I think it's a good idea. Keep the Vikings in their base defense as much as possible. Keep Gideon on the field. Keep the extra defensive back off. And I think it was in those situations a few times where they actually had success throwing the ball to the tight end. I would say if this Vikings defense is vulnerable in one way, it's if you can keep them in base, keep 3 linebackers on the field, and find a tight end. Because that play is there. But the problem there is eventually they're going to see this on film as well, and I would guess that they're easily smart enough to adjust to that. So that's the one thing that San Francisco tried to exploit, and if I was them, in this game at least, I would have exploited as much as humanly possible.
I would say if Jaron Kearse continues to show that he can play in the nickel when required, then a 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 5 where they could run or could pass, 2nd and 7, something like that, those are areas where if the other team brings in 2 tight ends, you send out Jaron Kearse as your nickel guy, and you treat it almost like it's a nickel package, except for it's with someone who's big enough to be a safety, but is also quick enough, because that's why they drafted him in the 7th round. It was based on athleticism more than anything, and he doesn't seem like a dumb kid either. So you have to be able to do that to be with Mike Zimmer for him to be able to hang around this long. So you take that athleticism and length, and then if he can fill in other positions too, like he did today, either he or George Iloka, who could play this role eventually, I think we saw all those things that we talked about going into this. Is we're going to see a more multiple defense from Zimmer, and we really did. On the offensive side, Judd, I thought that, speaking of things that you expected to happening, Kirk Cousins was who we thought he is. That there were times where he made great throws, and that throw to Stephon Diggs, that throw to Kyle Rudolph, those 2 touchdowns are both A-plus throws. On the money, those are ones that Case Keenum rarely made. But there was some situational football things that really made you shake your head. There was, at the end of the first half, a throw to Dalvin Cook that needs to be spiked at his feet to stop the clock.
Yeah, that was bad.
There's a near pick 6 that he just kind of wings out into the flat, that he didn't see somebody and took an unnecessary risk on that.
Yep.
And there's one more. Oh, and him diving neck first.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't smart.
Although Zim defended I know that drove you crazy.
Zim defended it. He said in that situation, and Cousins said the same thing too. I think that was crazy. But that was, as Les Frazier and Christian Ponder used to say, easily correctable. Kirk, don't ever do that again. But yeah, I mean, he is basically everything we've talked about, which is he has the ability to make throws that a lot of guys can't make throws. He brought up situational football again in his post-game press conference, and here's my thought process about that. I wonder if he's so obsessed with it that it's sort of an indication inside his soul that he thinks about it too much. Like that he gets, because and this is, okay, so I've got a 2-series sequence for you, and tell me if this is on DeFilippo, Cousins, or both. But one 2-series sequence that really shocked me was Xavier Rhodes picks off the pass. The Vikings are up at this point. It's early 4th quarter. The Vikings take over Matthew Coller with 14:37 left. They run 3 plays and punt. San Francisco gets the ball back with 13:43 left in the 4th quarter, and they end that drive with a Robbie Gould field goal. Then the Vikings get the ball back again, 8:09 left, 3 plays and out, and San Francisco has the ball back at 7:09.
So how much time in between there, basically?
So the first one I gave you was 14:37 until 13:43. The second one, 8:09 until 7:09, a minute. possession.
Yeah.
The point being is those got to be situations where you eat clock. Mm-hmm. And this is the situational thing that bugged me the most today, because there's going to be games that are tighter, and I don't care how you win, but if you've got the ball in the fourth quarter with the lead, you've got to eat clock. So is your theory that this goes to the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, a combination of both? Because I think when the Vikings sit down and go through this game, this is going to be something that they need to take seriously and rectify, because that's the type of thing that will bite you in the ass come January.
Hey guys, it's Phil Mackey from the Mackey and Judd Show, but I also host, along with my friend Derek Wetmore, a Twins podcast called Touch 'Em All. It's basically just a couple of stat geeks making up things like WAR and VORP and BABIP and babbling on about the Twins. You can find the Touch 'Em All podcast on Apple Podcasts, the 1500 ESPN mobile app, or anywhere you would generally find podcasts.
Well, I would say that some of it has to be on the quarterback, because sometimes he has the opportunity to check to a run if it's a pass play. There's also situations where if you take a sack, that's okay because it keeps the clock running, and that's actually better on a third down and long to take a sack than it is to wing the ball out of bounds, because you at least kill another, whatever it is, 40 seconds. So there is some of that, but I would look at that and say, you have Latavius Murray. This is what he's here for. This is what he's paid for. And Dalvin Cook. But in that point, maybe Dalvin Cook is feeling a little worn down in the fourth quarter. But this is a Latavius thing. Like, this is a big man who's made the Pro Bowl because he's big and can run over people. So bring him in as your sort of closer and kill 3 minutes off the clock. I mean, we saw them do that later in the game, but when you're up by as much as they are at that point, you need to start doing that as soon as you're in the fourth quarter. That even Bill Belichick used LeGarrette Blount to do things like that over the past few years, and they throw all the time. And if you're going to throw, it has to be the short passes, the bubble screens, the screens to get the ball moving down the field, but also the clock running.
Absolutely.
And they had so much success with the screens. I thought they went away from them a little bit, and they could have still been there in the fourth quarter. And even if they don't hit for big plays, the clock is still running. So I thought that was the door being cracked open, and probably a mistake by the play caller to allow that to happen. Now, overall, though, this was something that I wanted to talk about, was DeFilippo's first day in office as the offensive coordinator. I mean, I thought overall he had a very good day. They got Dalvin Cook 6 catches for 55 yards, 9 yards a catch. Thielen hits on a big play, 34-yarder. I mean, the touchdown to Diggs, he ends up averaging 14 yards a catch. Overall, there was very little that I had to complain about, and what you saw, Judd, that I liked a ton was all, and this is very Shermer-like, all sorts of personnel. He used everybody he could. Stacey Coley got involved. Tyler Conklin got involved. This was one thing I loved about Shermer, where you'd look at the game after, and it would be, okay, Thielen Diggs, 5 catches, 6 catches, then everybody else 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And that's exactly what this thing looks like. The score sheet I have in front of me is Conklin gets a catch, Rudolph gets a catch, but it's a touchdown.
Yep. Nice catch, too. Great catch.
That was very good, I think, on DeFilippo's part, to be able to spread the ball around and use a lot of different personnel.
And this is just going to take time, too. In fairness to all parties involved, which include the coordinator, the quarterback, the whole thing. This is just going to take time, which goes back to the original point at the top of this podcast, which is that your defense for a while is going to have to carry your team. And your offense needs to contribute and not screw up. And Cook can't have a great run that he fumbles at the end of, and that results in a lost ball. But all of that being said, I don't think it's fair to really start to pass a judgment on where this offense is at, probably until week 5 or so. The only concern is, I think, immediately when you go back and watch the film, is very clearly going to be left guard. I mean, Tom Compton was signed as a backup. He is a backup. He's Cousins' buddy. It's great he's here. I got no problem with that. But if you continue to have to try and start him, I don't know that that's something that's going to turn itself around. But if Elflein gets back and then Jones can kick out to left guard, I think your offensive line, while not outstanding, is going to be sufficient. But overall, I think all parties involved deserve at least 4 games or so to try and get on the same page before we pass judgment on, is this offense, is the continuity looking good, or is something off still?
So let me just, before we get back to the offensive line, touch on Dalvin Cook quickly. That I think you saw it with Dalvin Cook what has always been there with him, that at one point he gets the ball and just shreds 2 tackles like they weren't even there and goes right by them for a pretty big gain. He didn't have a whole lot of area to run in. There were many times where he just didn't have space, and I think if Kirk Cousins doesn't throw him an ill-advised pass that he loses something like 6 yards, he's got, a much better yards per catch for today. He still ends with averaging 9 yards a catch, but it's even better if you take that one that was not really his fault out of the picture. He showed you today once again that he is one of the centerpieces of this offense, if not the centerpiece, because of all the different things he could do. He lined up at wide receiver at one point. This is going to be the Dalvin Cook offense, and then everyone else works off it. If he's succeeding, then everybody else will succeed, and we saw that today.
His presence is a factor too, right? That's the biggest thing is if he has big days, that's great, but the key here is his presence, because if he's in the backfield or he lines up wide, he has to be accounted for, and that's going to, as you just said, basically give the ability to create success for the rest of the personnel out there. So I just think, and this goes back to, he is an ideal running back for 2018. He's the type of guy you absolutely need because you don't know what he's going to do. I think today he got off to a good start. I think he tired out a bit, which was not a complete surprise. But nonetheless, the thing is, the reason why you got to keep putting him out there is the second he goes off the field, the offense becomes a lot more predictable. When he's not out there, when he is out there, you have to account for him at every snap.
Okay, offensive line. Without breaking down the tape yet, which, Judd, there will be an episode that is coming up where we take a look at
Is your offensive line guy going to be involved?
Yes, he will.
Awesome.
The offensive line guy,
Good.
Brandon Thorne, will be back.
He's not going to be happy.
With this one, I'm going to go ahead and guess he's not going to be happy because DeForest Buckner did what we thought he was going to do, and he dominated this game. He had 3 sacks. That's how many he had last year. I mean, he was very, very disruptive last year. He was a monster in the middle, and it shows you just how badly they need Pat Elflein to come back and how Tom Compton can help you for a game if you need him. And if there are other times that this season he has to fill in, but if it's any more than that, your offensive line is in trouble. And I would not give them particularly high marks on this day.
You know what? I'm not sure overall if that's true or not. I'm guessing that you're right, but it's just the Compton factor. The Compton factor, if he has to continue to play, it's going to be a problem. Now, hopefully, for the Vikings' sake, Elflein's back in a couple weeks, and that's fine. But you could just see that interior pressure. And this also, you know what? We did see today, Cousins has the ability to take off and run. He can do that. But Kirk Cousins, if he's going to maximize his potential for this team at quarterback, needs that interior pressure not to be consistently there. And there were times today where it was consistently there. And you can see him, you can literally see Cousins trying to wait out the pressure, but not look comfortable there. So, yes, this is going to be, if this lasts for more than a few weeks, it's going to become an issue on Elflein's return because Tom Compton, if he needs to come in, can do that. But if Tom Compton needs to start consistently, you signed a quarterback to a 3-year, guaranteed $84 million contract. You did not sign it to make him skittish.
Right.
It's just that simple.
I'm going to also say about this offensive line and the impact that it has on Cousins, that outside pressure seems to affect him more so than the inside pressure. And I know that Buckner was the one with the sacks, but when it comes to thinking he might have a little more time than he does, that seems like a thing he does. But he did do a nice job in running with the football today, aside from diving.
Aside from the head first. Yeah, that was just
aside from diving head first, but he gave them a chance to get a first down there. And then
he can run.
We didn't even mention the hard count that San Francisco jumped on, which is still mind-blowing.
You know what, though? You know what? I loved it because it reminded us all of former Viking now, B-Rob. Brian Robinson, who I believe bid on the Roethlisberger hard count in Pittsburgh last year in week 2. So it was an ode to B-Rob that the 49ers guy took the bait and jumped on 4th and 1 and gave the Vikings a first down. B-Rob, that was for you.
Okay. let me put a wrap on this by saying that I view this win over the San Francisco 49ers on this day, Sunday, September 9th, as one of the most important to this season. That when you look at the first 5 games, the Vikings might put 70 on the Buffalo Bills, considering what they did against the Rams in week 1. But aside from that, you have Aaron Rodgers, you've got the Rams offense, you've got Carson Wentz will probably be back for Philadelphia by then.
Yep.
This is going to be a really rough road, and in order to survive the first 5 games, they needed this one badly. And to get it, you walk away going, I don't care if it was ugly at times.
Yep.
This was the one you really, really needed to get to set you up for the rest of the season.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you lost this game and then you go to Green Bay next Sunday, and there's no guarantee with that game. Yeah, you could have easily, if you had lost this game, it could be 1-4. So yeah, this game was necessary. I knew this game would be tough. I expected the Vikings to win this game. In reality, both teams, I think, can take this tape and break it down and say we screwed up. And San Francisco is going to go back and watch this game and be like, we should have won that game. And they should have. But yeah, I didn't give that much thought to the Vikings actually losing to San Francisco, because if they had, the conversation would have been, are you starting 1-4? Are you winning? Okay, so you go to Green Bay and you lose, you're going to beat Buffalo. Are you then putting your money on potentially a Thursday night win against the Rams out there? That's going to be tough as hell. Philadelphia, that's tough. So I didn't really reserve a lot of thought for the fact that the Vikings could lose today or would lose, because then the conversation would have been one that for Vikings fans they wouldn't have liked much. And you know me, Matthew Coller, I try and be positive at every turn, drinking the purple Kool-Aid.
Oh, yes, of course. And I just wanted to tack on before we sign off that Daniel Carlson was perfect today, just as you predicted, Judd Zulgad.
Oh, that doesn't bite you in the ass until December or January, Matthew.
Of course.
Oh, no, that doesn't come get you in. The ghost of kicker decisions does not come and get you in September, my good man, nor October or even November. But December and January are where your young kicker begins to tighten up. Zimmer also did say, and you would have smirked if you had been there for his post-game press conference, Matthew Coller. Zimmer also said something along the lines of, I know a lot of you wanted us to take an old lineman in the first round, but Mike Hughes, pretty good player. Couldn't help himself. I smiled and nodded. I said you should take a guard. No question.
Yeah, and how'd your left guard look?
Yeah, I didn't. No, are you kidding?
Just saying.
I wasn't going to rub it into Zim like that.
You know what? No one has ever argued that Mike Hughes wasn't a good player.
I know.
I watched his college tape, and it was darn good. I mean, really, seriously.
Yeah, no.
And
that was not the argument.
This guy's college tape is unbelievable.
The argument was, do you have a sufficient guard?
Right.
And the answer is, in fairness now, I think the answer is if Brett Jones goes out to left guard from center and Elflein comes back, the answer might be maybe.
Might be maybe.
It might be maybe.
And a little early to pimp that home run. We'll see how it plays out and how those decisions impact them long term. But
I'm bat flipping.
Mike Hughes had a tremendous first game, and I would expect him to be a good player who might be farther along than Rhodes was, and then Wayans and Mackenzie Alexander, who is not getting that job back. Not after what happened today.
Trey Waynes might be struggling to get his job back.
I mean,
I like Trey Waynes, but if Mike Hughes is as good as you say he is, this could be interesting. I'm not saying that Trey Waynes won't play. I'm just saying I wonder if the thought process of where Mike Hughes plays and where Trey Waynes plays and when might change a little bit if Mike Hughes has to continue to play if Waynes misses a few weeks.
And if they keep Waynes around next year on his fifth-year option, because he's set to make a lot of money. Yeah. But we are very far away from that decision. Just to start with, at least a great day for Mike Hughes. It's still very questionable to not draft an offensive lineman when that's your only need. But
I'm not saying anything else.
But Hughes had a fantastic game, especially when you throw it right at him and he catches it and then walks into the end zone. That also helps too.
You know what? It's a nice touchdown return, pick in the box score. I'm giving him credit. That's fine. As I told you before, I'm very positive today.
Okay, 1-0. If Judd is on the positive side, then we really know that it must have been good. So,
or that we need to go.
All right. Thank you all for listening. We will have tons for you coming up this week on the Purple Podcast.
It's the two megastars summer mashup. The awesome iPhone on the Rockstar Metro PCS network. Get the iPhone you've always wanted for $0 so you can jam without limits.
It's a hit. Get an iPhone SE on us when you switch. Metro PCS. Coverage not available in some areas, plus sales tax and $10 activation fee. Requires port in of number not currently active on T-Mobile network or on Metro PCS in past 90 days to an unlimited LTE plan. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Campaign aide sentenced. I'm Tim McGuire with an AP News Minute. The Trump campaign aide who set the entire Russia investigation into motion has been sentenced to 14 days in prison for lying to the FBI. George Papadopoulos' lawyer, Thomas Breen, tells reporters,
I know some people will think the sentence is light. Some people may think it's heavy. But there's no doubt in my mind that the judge issued what he thought was a very fair sentence.
In a speech to college students in Illinois, former President Barack Obama says President Trump is wrong in his demands of Attorney General Jeff Sessions and the FBI.
It should not be a partisan issue to say that we do not pressure the Attorney General or the FBI to use the criminal justice system as a cudgel to punish our political opponents.
When asked during the Miss America contest about what she sees as the most serious issue facing America, Miss West Virginia Madeline Collins says President Trump is the biggest issue for our country today, and he has caused a lot of division. I'm Tim McGuire.